Leftists are now rallying around the Somali scammers. This has been quite a couple of weeks on the left. They've been rallying in defense of Somali scammers and drug traffickers. So those are the two groups that they've decided to defend the last couple of weeks. And they're doing that, of course, because Trump has said that we should not be importing these people. They don't contribute anything. And I said yesterday that if he's wrong, say so. Tell us what Somalians contribute to the country. I think it's a really fair question. Bringing in all these people, tens of thousands of people, I think it's fair to say, well, why are we bringing them in? What are they doing for us? What's in it for us? What do we get out of this deal? I know what they get out of it, but what do we get out of it? Well, now they're taking a stab. The left is taking a stab at answering that riddle. And you can tell why they usually avoid it. Okay, they're taking a stab at getting away from the emotional appeals and actually trying to make a practical argument and say, you know what? We need Somalians in this country because here's what we get out of it. Here's the local ABC affiliate in Minneapolis attempting to address this.
Back to tonight's top story. Sources tell ABC News that immigration efforts targeting Somali Minnesotans are underway in Minneapolis. President Trump's effort comes after he publicly questioned the community's contributions to the economy.
But new research shows Somali Minnesotans generate hundreds of millions in income and millions more in taxes. Kamaria Bray joins us live in Minneapolis with a look at the data.
Well, Kevin and Lindsay, we are at Hamdi Restaurant on East Lake Street. This is a Somali-owned business, and we talked to the owner who says he works very hard and pays his dues like many Somalis in the state, and he hopes that the president can recognize it. At Hamdi's Restaurant on East Lake Street, if it's not the smell of grilled meat that lures you in,
this is the rice.
It's the welcome of the owner.
We are working hard, family. We are working 7 days a week.
Abdi Shakur Elmi moved to Minnesota from Somalia in the 90s. He and his family have run the restaurant for decades.
Like me and my dad, we work very hard every single day.
And it's their labor that's being questioned by the President of the United States.
These are people that work, they contribute nothing.
But that contradicts the research from Concordia University's economist, Dr. Bruce Corey.
I could share that information with him and he probably changed his mind.
According to his research, Somali income is at least $500 million in Minnesota. They pay $67 million annually in state and local taxes.
The estimated impact of these workers, the Somali workers in Minnesota, could be about $8 billion. That's with a B, not an M. And it's the way what they help produce and how that production in turn generates and ripples through the economy.
What industry would feel the biggest hit if Somalis were to leave Minnesota?
I have a feeling retail probably could be first because of that massive consumer income.
All right. First of all, I love how she says, customers are lured into this wonderful Somali restaurant, and then you see it, and it's like the most depressing, emptiest restaurant you've ever seen in your life. Customers are lured by the droves into this restaurant, and then behind her, there's nobody. There's no one. It's just a bunch of empty tables, fluorescent lights in this small, dingy little restaurant. And then we get a look at the mystery meat cooking on the grill. Customers are lured by the tantalizing scent of what I can only assume are goat innards. She forgot to mention that they're lured to another restaurant. But they peer into the place and they're like, what is this? And then they're lured to the Chipotle down the street. That's what ends up happening. So that restaurant is keeping Chipotle open down the street. That's the service it's providing. And look, I mean, why would anyone go to a Somali restaurant? Unless you're Somalian, I suppose. But even then, if you're in America, I mean, one of the advantages is there's a lot of much better food available. So you think you'd go somewhere else. When I think about places where I really want to try their cuisine, Somalia does not come to mind. That's the kind of place where if you were to ever visit that place, you would make sure to bring a lot of like energy bars and Chex Mix so that you can live on that. You don't have to eat any of the food. But more to the point, they give us the numbers. So they're trying to argue that Somalians contribute so much to the community. And so they actually give us some numbers. And what are the contributions that they list? Well, they're not claiming that Somalians are innovating in any way. They're not saying, well, hey, look, here's these Somalians scientists who've invented this thing, or here's a bunch of Somalian doctors who are performing heart surgeries. They're not saying that. Instead, they're telling us that Somalians are paying taxes, generating income, and buying stuff, which of course is the bare minimum that any group would meet, right? That's not like, if that's all you're doing, well, any group, Americans already do that. Okay, so we don't need to bring people in here to buy stuff. The idea that, well, we can't get rid of Somalians, who's going to buy the stuff? Americans know how to buy stuff. We got that covered. And why do we need to bring in foreigners from 8,000 miles away who are broker than us? What if the argument is we want to pump money into the economy because we won't need people to buy stuff? So we're going to bring in like these impoverished masses from the third world to buy the stuff for us? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, let's look at the numbers. He says that, well, first of all, we got that economist, supposedly, says that Somalians could account for $8 billion in economic impact. Well, what does that mean? Could account for $8 billion in, quote, economic impact. Okay, well, I could account for $8 billion in economic impact all by myself. I'm not saying I do. I could. If somebody says, hey, man, do you account for $8 billion in economic impact? I could say, I could. I could. I mean, it's logically possible. It's possible that I could. There's a world, there's a universe in which maybe that would happen. It's not physically impossible. It doesn't defy the laws of physics. I could account for $50 trillion in economic impact. I could. And what does economic impact mean? Like hurricanes have an economic impact. Tornadoes have economic impact. A bank robber has an economic impact. What is economic impact? Bernie Madoff had an economic impact. What do you mean impact? Impact like an impact crater? Impact like an asteroid? What kind of impact are we talking about? And how do you qualify that? How do you quantify it? Well, he doesn't explain. So that you could just disregard. That doesn't mean anything. We just disregard it, and he doesn't provide any evidence for it. He's not even sure that his numbers are right. That's why he's saying, well, he could. It could be this. We get one really solid, verifiable number. Actually, we get two. He says Somalians pay $67 million in taxes. Okay. Well, finally, we have a number. All right. That's a solid number. That's a thing we can look at. We can verify it. Well, let's dig into it. $67 million in taxes. Okay, we know that there are about, and this is probably a lot more than this, but let's just say there are 80,000 Somalians. I've seen estimates of 100,000, 150,000, certainly 100,000 I've seen, which I think you could, it's certainly more than whatever the official estimate is. And so if the official estimate is 100,000, you could probably assume it's like 150,000, maybe even double that. Who knows? But let's just go with 80,000. Let's just pretend it's 80,000. Okay, fine. Do some simple math. $67 million. That's the taxes they pay, local and state, divided by 80,000 people. Well, that works out to about $800 a person. Okay? So by their numbers, Somalians contribute less than 900. But if you had asked me to guess, I would have said, oh, they probably, on average pay a couple thousand. I don't know. So what I learned from these numbers is I had a higher opinion of the Somali community in Minnesota than was actually justified according to the numbers. I was optimistic. Okay, the guy that's been ranting about Somalians for months. Okay, I was dumping on the Somalians way before it was cool. And am I proud of that? I absolutely am. But even me, I looked at that, I'm like, it's that bad? Wow. And so I guess what they're hoping is that nobody will pull out a calculator, which we all have on our phones, and just do the numbers on that. Because already we know that the $67 million in taxes is a fraction of the $1 billion in fraud these people have committed. And that's just one fraud scheme. Okay. And it's less than the many millions in welfare that they're taking. So already this all breaks down. Already we're deep in the red. Okay. $67 million in taxes, $1 billion in fraud. Let's pretend that one fraud scheme that costs $1 billion is the only one, which it isn't. Still, $67 million contributed, $1 billion taken. I mean, if you can bring in a group of people who will give you $67 million, but then take $1 billion, are you going to take that deal? If I come to you and say, hey, I'll give you $67 million, you'd probably say, nice, I'll take it. Thank you. But then I say, okay, but what I want in exchange is $1 billion. Here's the deal I'm offering you. I give you $67 million. You give me $1 billion. You like that deal? Is that a good deal? I mean, what do you think? Are you taking that deal? Are you jumping at that deal? And again, remember the $1 billion, that's just one fraud scheme. It doesn't take into account welfare, entitlements, all the other fraud. But just, we don't even need, like, it's so bad that we could just pretend that was the only fraud. And it's still, okay, you have not even come close to paying back what you have taken through taxes. But it gets worse. Because you can also do the math and find out how much in taxes, state and local, the average Minnesotan pays. Right? So, got the average Somalian in Minnesota. Well, what about all the other people in Minnesota? Somalians pay about $800 in local and state taxes. How much does the average non-Somalian Minnesotan pay? What do you think? The answer is about $8,000 to $10,000. So Somalians are paying more than 10 times less than the average Minnesotan. That's what we learn. Okay? And we haven't even looked at the income yet. So they tell us that Somalians generate $500 million in income. Okay. And again, there's a lot that we're just going to pretend that we don't know that they're shipping a lot of that back in remittances to Somalia. A lot of that is going into the coffers of, people in Somalia. It's going into the coffers of terrorist